Thank you very much, everyone. And so we bear in mind that we are really in the zone, so to speak, for this full moon period. And do bear in mind this preliminary period always before the exact full moon and the couple of days afterwards as well. Quite often people build up their tension to the full moon and then relax it or let it go completely the day after, which can be somewhat dangerous, psychically speaking. One can run into some problems if you don't stay vigilant. So, if anyone wants to share their impressions of the meditation, feel free to do so now before we get started. All right. We do this every month, of course, this set meditation. And as most of you know, the visualization is the key to meditation. It's really building in substance that which wasn't there before. And it's always a challenge to visualize. Some ray types find it more difficult to visualize than others, particularly first ray types, according to the Tibetan. Others find it very easy and can, have all sorts of imagery come to mind. But the key is that using the imagination combined with the thought processes that creates a fusion of the so-called masculine and feminine energies and builds anew, builds into your being qualities that weren't there before, or expand upon existing qualities. So this symbol here of the goat with the tail of a fish or a dolphin, in fact, it's actually most definitely a dolphin tail in this particular picture. Other pictures you see of a fish. And I don't know whether most of you have read my newsletter yet, but I do talk about the goat fish, the half goat, half dolphin, and the so-called mystery of Makara, which is quite profound. And I have a long essay about that. And I might have posted on my website, but if not, it's in one of my books. That attempts to probe the mystery of Capricorn. And they say that the sign or the glyph for Capricorn has never been given properly because to draw it would draw down energies with which the individual would be ill-equipped to deal with. And this hints at the great power of Capricorn and also the energy of magic. The seventh ray of ceremonial order of magic is one of the rays that comes through Capricorn, but also the first ray of will or power. Of course, the goat, I was going to say the gloat. The goat is a very hardy animal that walks independently and stands on precarious outcrops on the mountainside, and is incredibly strong and persevering. So now I'm going to draw from a few of the themes in the newsletter because of the fact that the 6th, when the full moon is exact, on the 6th of January, this is called the Epiphany, the date that celebrates the nativity of the Christ. So the whole, and of course is the 12th day of the 12 days of Christmas. And they count from Christmas Day or from Boxing Day. But if you count from Boxing Day, the day after Christmas, you end up on the 6th of January. And it's not only the celebration of the nativity of the Christ, but also the three wise men who symbolize the masters or kings. These are Capricorn initiates who have scaled the ultimate mountaintop and who, of course, come from the east. As the famous hymn reveals, we three kings of Orient are, bearing gifts we traverse afar, etc., etc. And that Orient is most likely Persia. It could be as far away as India, but most likely Persia, given the dress and the garb that they're wearing, or are depicted by, and their names as well. And this is quite an eye-opening thing. I never really considered it before, but they're seeking out the Christ child in the manger in Bethlehem is like the tradition of the Tibetan lamas who, through certain signs and so forth, follow those signs to the next Dalai Lama, the incarnation, the child or baby incarnation of the next Dalai Lama. And so likewise, the three kings recognized Jesus as the Messiah, traveling thousands of miles to pay homage. And of course, the Magi is a Persian term for a practitioner of magic, which included, of course, astronomy, astrology, alchemy, and other forms of esotericism. And of course, they were guided by planetary movements as well as signs. And no doubt what I feel is the conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn in Pisces that inaugurated the Piscean age, that allowed the Piscean avatar to come in and, in fact, appropriate that in his horoscope to start the 2,000 odd years cycle in Pisces. And recently, of course, in 2020, we had a similar Jupiter-Saturn conjunction in Aquarius, which I feel is a similar thing, heralding the birth of the Christ for the Aquarian age. And who knows, he may have already taken the incarnation by the various methods that the masters can use. So, and of course, the externalization of the hierarchy will take place within the next century for sure, within this century, I should say. We're just not quite sure of exactly when. Tomorrow, 10 years, 20, 30 years, as I've speculated before many times in my newsletters. And in this picture here, they're talking to Herod. He wasn't a very pleasant chap, apparently. And I'm not sure whether they did talk to him, but anyway, that artist thinks so. So this birth at Bethlehem represents the first initiation and major events in the life of Jesus, who went on to become Jesus the Christ, in other words, being overshadowed by the one who holds the office of the Christ. Those initiations were symbolized accordingly. The second initiation, the baptism in the River Jordan, third initiation, the transfiguration on the mountaintop, and the fourth initiation, the actual crucifixion itself. And the Tibetan outlines this quite considerably in several of his books, but particularly in Razor Initiations. And also Alice Bailey herself, one of her books that she wrote without the Tibetan, from Bethlehem to Calvary, she outlines these initiations. The Tibetan says there is nothing spectacular to be told about the first initiation. The initiate disciple still works in the dimly lit cave of the spiritual birth. He has to continue his struggle to reveal divinity primarily on the physical plane, symbolized for us in the word Bethlehem, which means the house of bread. He has to learn the dual function of lifting up the lower energies into the light, and at the same time of bringing down the higher energies into bodily expression. Thus he becomes a white magician. So the first initiation can pass by almost unnoticed in some people. The second and third initiations are a big deal. They definitely are a major event in a person's life, subjectively and objectively. And as I pointed out in my book, for instance, on the initiations of Krishnamurti, where he recapitulated the first few initiations and then took initiations after that. So when a person contacts the Christ energy or the energy of their own soul, it pours into their etheric body and creates a very high frequency that is at odds with the frequency of the physical body, and thereby the initiate, or the one who's taken the first initiation, spends lives going into balancing those energies, particularly through diet, health, exercise, and to bring the physical body frequencies up to the same level as the etheric frequencies. And that can take a while. And it is said that a person can spend up to 30 incarnations between the first and the second degree initiations, which is quite a long time, in terms of starting to burn off a lot of karma that's been created on the so-called mutable cross. Because when you take the first initiation, you've mounted the so-called fixed cross. And so in your past deliberation, you're burning off ancient karma, and learning how to control the desire body, or astral body as it's called, that culminates in the second degree initiation. So Leo the lion generically rules the first degree initiation, Scorpio the second initiation, and Aquarius the third initiation, all signs of the fixed cross. So Capricorn is the 10th sign of the zodiac, and number 10 is the number of perfection. You have the numeral 1, which is a masculine energy, and the numeral 0, which is feminine. And the synthesis of both creates 10. And even exoterically, people recognize 10 as the number of perfection. Capricorn was, in fact, at one stage back in Lemuria, the last sign of the zodiac. It wasn't the 10th sign, but it was it was the 10th sign. It was the 8th sign at one stage, but it was the 10th sign for a long time, and represented perfection, of course. And the first yoga of the root races of Hatha Yoga, where the physical etheric was balanced through that practice. So, anyone wants to jump in and ask a question or make a comment so far?
Nothing so far, Philip.
Very good. So here we enter a very arcane area, the Capricorn, the dolphin, Varuna, and the sea gods. One of my favorite topics, and still a great mystery. I first got an impression about this when I was camping back in the 90s, the early 1990s, and woke up in the middle of the night and started making this dodecahedron out of paper. I didn't know it was a dodecahedron at the time. A dodecahedron is 12 5-sided, 12 pentagons. So I started cutting out these pentagons out of paper, measuring them up and cutting them out with a pair of scissors and taping them together. And when I got halfway through it, I realized it was a dodecahedron, although I don't think I knew it was a dodecahedron at the time. And that's where the 30-odd page essay emanated from that time. And I've come back to it many times. So the latest newsletter is just a snippet, really, of that longer essay, kind of recycled, if you like, but looking at it with new eyes, because with the Ageless Wisdom, we can read and study something, and then 5 years later or 10 years later, look at it with completely different eyes, because we've integrated a lot of the information, the knowledge, and we've moved up to another level of understanding. So Capricorn is regarded traditionally as an earth sign, the earthy element of the mountain the Capricorn goat climbs, but it has a profound relationship to the element of water, which of course the opposite sign, Cancer, is. Cancer is a water sign. It's ruled esoterically by Neptune, and Neptune has a lot to do with the mystery of Makara, the god of the waters, rules over the oceans, and of course dolphins and sea goats. So in ancient times, we have the cave of Mithras, the birthplace of the sun at the winter solstice in Capricorn, the sign of the sea goat. In the Christian tradition, the cave continued to be symbolic, the symbolic birthplace of the Christ. In the Sumero-Babylonian god Ea, or E, had the upper body of a goat and the lower body of a fish, and was connected with work, wisdom, and the instruction of humankind. He was like a Manu figure. A Manu is one of the major heads of the hierarchy, and also has a similarity with the ancient Oannes as depicted on the left here. You can see the fish cape or coat that he's wearing, and in fact the head of the fish up here is the source of the hats that they wear, that the bishops wear in the Christian church. So these old traditions have been integrated into the more recent religions, of course, as is always. This was the Babylonian Dag, and Dag is actually a word for Christ, who emerged from the sea in the clothing of a fish and also with the fish avatar of Vishnu, both of them teaching us mortals wisdom. So they can be seen as a Manu type of figure or a Christ type of figure, or one of the guides of humanity in general. In other words, the hierarchy. As to why he clothed himself with a cloak of a fish is uncertain, is a mystery. When you go back to the ancient story of Lemuria, Blavatsky talks about the Elohim who could breathe with equal ease underwater or above the water. So a great mystery there, perhaps relating to these beings being semi-etheric. Anyway, the true esoteric sense of the word Makara does not mean crocodile, even when compared with the animal depicted on the Hindu zodiac, for it has the head and the forelegs of an antelope and the body of a tail of a fish. Hence, the 10th sign of the zodiac has been taken to variously mean a shark, a dolphin, as it is the Vahan, or vehicle of Varuna. The dolphin was the vehicle of Poseidon, Neptune, with the Greeks, and one with him, esoterically. The dolphin was placed for his service by Poseidon amongst the constellations and became Capricorn as the goat, whose hind part is a dolphin, identical with Makara, whose head is an antelope with body and tail of a fish. So it's just repeating a few of the things we've already said. But there's also a constellation called Delphinus, the dolphin, which is separate from Capricorn too. So there's another area for the esoteric student to investigate. Okay. Any other comments, questions so far? All right.
Nothing, Philip.
Very good. Well, most of you are probably familiar with Yogananda. Many of us have read his major bestseller autobiography of a yogi. I know I read it years ago. I should read it again, really. He was one of the 3 Capricorn initiates that I discuss in my latest newsletter on Capricorn. And he was an advanced initiate upon the 2nd ray of love wisdom, no doubt about that, which is the primary ray of the teacher. And his books and discourses are really quite profound and wide-ranging. Quoting here, he was a chief disciple of the Bengali yoga guru Swami Sri Yukteswar Giri. He was sent by his lineage to spread the teachings of yoga to the West, to prove the unity between Eastern and Western religions, and to preach a balance between Western material growth and Indian spirituality. Of course, I'll read the rest. His long-standing influence in the American yoga movement, and especially the yoga culture of Los Angeles, led him to be considered by yoga experts as the father of yoga in the West. Probably some of you have been to Encinitas, where the Self-Realization Fellowship is. There's a place where you can meditate on the cliffs there by the ocean. Been there a few times. And also to the park in the northern part of Los Angeles. What's it called? I can't remember now. But a beautiful park that's part of that fellowship. Sri Yukteswar later informed Yogananda that he'd been sent to him by the great guru of their lineage, Mahavata Babaji. Most of you have probably heard of Babaji as well, for a special world purpose of yoga dissemination. And that he said that Babaji and Christ together, they send out vibrations of redemption and have planned the spiritual technique of salvation for this age. Salvation being a key word for Pisces, this age that we're just finishing. To inspire the nations to forsake suicidal wars, race hatreds, religious sectarianism, and the boomerang evils of materialism. They've certainly got their work cut out for them, have they not? In the chat here, Catherine says, both Avatar 2 and Wakanda Forever feature people who can breathe underwater. Yes, indeed. Water is a strong theme in both. And so I speculate that Yogananda was a 4th degree initiate, although, as you can read on my newsletter comments, others think that he may have even taken the 5th degree initiation, which is where you become a master of wisdom, and that may be true. His title Paramahansa means great swan, which is actually a name for a 4th degree initiate, apparently. So perhaps he came in at that level of unfoldment and went on to take the 5th initiation, or perhaps he came in as a 3rd degree and took the 4th degree. Either way, his stage of spirituality or unfoldment is undoubted. And so in his horoscope, he is Virgo rising, with the moon in Leo and the sun in Capricorn. And you can see he has a grand cross here in his chart. Earth in Cancer opposite the sun in Capricorn, with Jupiter opposite Saturn. So it's a cardinal grand cross. It's on the cardinal cross, in fact, that the 5th initiation, the 4th and the 5th initiations are actually taken. It doesn't mean to say that if you've got the cardinal crossing is prominent in your chart that you're going to be taking that. I also mentioned in my newsletter, I talked a lot about Venus and Capricorn being the hierarchical ruler of that sign, and how there are a lot of quotes about Venus and Capricorn and the 3rd degree. But just because you have it in your chart does not necessarily mean you're going to be at that stage of unfoldment. Millions of horoscopes around the world would have Venus and Capricorn, for instance. or grand crosses in cardinal signs, but be at all various stages of evolutionary unfoldment. But in obvious advanced souls like Yogananda, we can safely work with some of the criteria that the Tibetan has given us regarding the initiations. So now I said he's Virgo rising with Chiron in Virgo. Chiron is exalted in this sign. It functions very well there. Chiron, the wounded healer. Chiron, the teacher. And Mercury, of course, is the ruler of Virgo and is placed over here in Sagittarius, the sign that Chiron is the co-ruler of. Conjunct Venus in Sagittarius, the sign of spiritual orientation in terms of the mystery teachings, religion, philosophy, and so forth. And Mercury is conjunct Venus. Venus has more to do with the mind. Mercury has more to do with the intuition. So a great fusion of mind and intuition here with this conjunction. And the moon is the esoteric ruler of Virgo, placed in Leo over here. And I speculated that the moon in Yogananda's chart probably veils Neptune. The Tibetan talks about the moon and the sun veiling either Vulcan, Neptune, or Uranus in a horoscope, depending on the intuition of the astrologer. The moon actually makes I think I said, the moon veils, I think it veils Uranus in Yogananda's case because of a quintile aspect that the moon makes to Uranus. You can see in the aspect grid just here. Of course, the moon in Leo is Yogananda's leadership. It's placed in the 12th house where it's extremely psychically sensitive. And it rules the ascendant and is conjunct the ascendant. So it veils Uranus, the planet of occultism, placed in Scorpio, in the sign of Uranus's exaltation, in fact, where the scientific mind is able to control the watery emotional nature. All right, so now one of the things I said in my newsletter was that Yogananda wrote dozens of books, if not hundreds. I don't know exactly how many, but quite a lot. And he did say at one stage in his life that he could reach more people with the pen, using the pen. I've listened to a few recordings of Yogananda, and he's not easy to understand because he has a very heavy Indian accent. So perhaps that's why he resorted to writing. And of course, Virgo is the wordsmith par excellence, as I often talk about in my newsletters. The crafting of language that clothes ideas and thoughts, and so there's his sole purpose working out, particularly with Chiron, the teacher, conjunct the ascendant, Mercury and Sagittarius. But he also had two powerful planets in Gemini, Pluto and Neptune, exact conjunction in Gemini, the sign of communication, and Gemini also, of course, ruling the mid-heaven. So quite a remarkable chart. With this Grand Cross, he had some heavy responsibilities. Sun square Saturn is not an easy one. Saturn exalted in Libra, just as Uranus is exalted in Scorpio, so very powerful position there. Jupiter in Aries, the sign of the pioneer and the trailblazer. Jupiter, of course, the ruler of the second ray of love wisdom, which was most likely Yogananda's ray. So quite a considerable, there's an exact square between Jupiter and the Sun, not so exact square between Sun and Saturn. And then, of course, there's the Earth in Cancer. So the whole cardinal cross is activated here. Any comments? Some of you have read Yogananda. Okay. Mercury, of course, is the ruler of the mid-heaven in Gemini, so because it rules Gemini and Virgo. So Mercury's position here, very powerful, in the fourth house of the home and family, which at a higher level, the fourth house represents the spiritual family, the non-biological family, the inner ashram with which we're affiliated. And of course, Jupiter is the so-called hierarchical, or the third ruler, the highest ruler of Virgo. So its position squaring the sun, ruling the second ray of love wisdom, which is most likely his soul ray, also comes into quite high profile. All right. So we move on to Vivekananda. Some of you may not have heard of Vivekananda. He was around from a relatively short life, as you can see, 47, 49 years old. He passed. Both Vivekananda and Yogananda were made the conscious transition into death, which has a special name, Mahamasiddhi, I think it's called, and it's in my newsletter if you want to check it out. So, which is always the sign, making that conscious exit, sitting in meditation, in fact, for that moment, and then consciously exiting the body and not coming back. Of course, Yogananda's body did not putrefy after his death, and there's a big report about that by the local coroner, the local mortuary person doctor, who said it was a remarkable thing that his body did not decay over a period of several weeks after his death. So Vivekananda was similar to Yogananda in that he brought Hindu spirituality to the West. He was a bridge between East and West. He was an Indian Hindu monk, philosopher, author, religious teacher, chief disciple of the Indian mystic Ramakrishna. He was the key figure in the introduction of Vedanta and yoga to the Western world, and is credited with raising interfaith awareness and bringing Hinduism to the status of major world religion. So, but Vivekananda was a bit more esoteric than Yogananda, but some of Yogananda's stuff is very esoteric, I think. He had associations with connections with Blavatsky, Theosophy, the New Thought movement, and Western occultism. Very similar to another Indian, Sri Aurobindo, who was a Leo, who also played this similar role of bridging. So Vivekananda was a double Capricorn, or triple Capricorn, if you like, because he had Capricorn rising, Capricorn sun, exactly conjunct the ascendant. So he was born at sunrise, that means, usually. Venus in Capricorn as well. And was certainly at least the third degree, maybe much further than that. So the potency of Capricorn, developing Capricorn on a higher turn of the evolutionary spiral. We know that Saturn is both the exoteric and esoteric ruler of Capricorn. Saturn that rules the throat chakra, the seat of the mental body. And so having developing that higher turn of the evolutionary spiral means incorporating Venus as the hierarchical ruler of Capricorn and taking the higher initiations on the cardinal cross, of which Capricorn is one part, Libra is another. And that's where Saturn is placed. And I've got the Libra symbol here in this horoscope because in many ways, Libra was a huge part of his Dharma, of working out his soul purpose. Saturn exalted in Libra, just as Yogananda had, in fact. Yogananda being born much later, about 30 or 40 years later than Vivekananda. So that Saturn Libra is a very potent factor with the template, the ability to create templates, to create geometrical thought forms upon the mental plane. And of course, it's conjunct the moon in Libra. And so the bridge between East and West is well symbolized by Libra. Its actual glyph looks like a bridge. So, and that's exactly what he did. And Saturn and the moon in Libra really helped him play that out. In the ninth house, of course, the house of the mystery teachings, the ageless wisdom, religion, philosophy, and so forth. And he did a lot of work with religion. And of course, Jupiter, the second ray ruler, again, so prominent in Yogananda's chart, is the most elevated planet in this chart, conjunct the midheaven in Libra, and very prominent. And of course, in fact, square to Venus and the Sun, both Sun and Venus, or the midpoint of Sun and Venus, square Jupiter. So you have the two rulers of the second ray of love wisdom, the Sun and Jupiter, in very high tension aspect to each other. Then, of course, Mercury, the communicator, is very intuitive in the sign of Aquarius and makes an exact trine to the moon, as well as Saturn in Libra. So the higher wisdom and knowledge that Saturn, Moon, and Libra represent are easily communicated, effortlessly communicated, you could say, by Mercury in Aquarius, given that beautiful trine aspect. Do we have any other comments? You're all very quiet today, depending on where you are. So Capricorn is this spirit of achievement, of climbing the mountaintop. And the Tibetan makes a comment about that in his books when he said that the hierarchy, who are based up around the Himalayas, of course, were watching with great interest all the efforts at scaling Mount Everest, which had been going on since the late 1800s, and of course culminated in 1953 when Edmund Hillary and Tenzing reached the summit. And he said it was a great symbol of the fifth root race. In fact, this fifth branch race of the fifth root race, where the mental capacity of a certain percentage of humanity had reached a high watermark, if you like, and that gave them that mental tenacity and endurance, a discipline, which is required for climbing. As we all know, there are many casualties in many mountains all around the world where climbers regularly perish for one reason or another. And it's a great psychological battle with yourself that wants to maybe turn back and go down the mountain, or keep going, keep persevering to the summit. And so we take that as a metaphor for the perseverance that we that we have in our own inner battles to whatever those specific battles are. That's a daily process, of course, the daily kurukshetra, as we call it, to invoke that mental strength, particularly in terms of wrestling and with the astral body, with subjugating the astral body, not suppressing it, but controlling it. There's a difference there, and through that, eventually over those 30 up to 30 lives, the second degree initiation is taken generically ruled over by Scorpio. So with Uranus exalted in Scorpio, such as in Yogananda's chart, the planet of science, both exoteric and esoteric, there is the mental power. There are several mental planets. Saturn is just one. Uranus is another one. Mercury, to a degree, is one as well. Venus, of course. A couple of comments in the chat here. First of all, we have Inez says, discipline, something very hard to have nowadays, and it's a great characteristic of Capricorn. Capricorns can be super disciplined. And whether they're on the path of darkness or the path of light, they can be super disciplined. Capricorn can be the inverted five-pointed star of the mind, which is pointed towards materialism, or the up-pointed star that relates to the light. Hugh says, does Cancer being opposite Capricorn have anything to do with all the water associations with Capricorn? Yes, of course. I did say that before, I think. The ocean being beginning of life on Earth, Capricorn being the end in a sense. Yes, the highest initiations, the highest peak and deepest ocean trench. Yes, it's a good description. Cancer is the sign of the womb, and Capricorn is the sign of the tomb, from womb to tomb, from birth to death. Birth is regarded as death esoterically, and death is regarded as birth esoterically. So it's interesting how they get a conundrum there. But Cancer is definitely, in my longer essay, I do talk a lot about Cancer, Neptune being the esoteric ruler, having a lot to do with ruling the waters, the oceans, from where, as you say, all life came. And particularly when we consider the cube, the salt crystal within the ocean, as being fundamental foundation of all life in the ocean. There's a very deep connection there with that platonic solid called the cube. Catherine says, agreed, discipline is hard these days. Looks like Edmund Hillary is Cancer Sun and Capricorn rising. I don't recall that, but I know that when he made the summit, it was the Christ Festival in Gemini, full moon, and there's an article on my website about that. Just need to check that chart actually, now that you brought that up. Just a moment. Not Hillary Clinton, no. Here we go, Sir Edmund Hillary. And of course, he ended up doing a lot of work in Nepal and Tibet, mainly Nepal, I think, for the rest of his life. I don't suppose you can see this chart. I'd have to reselect the screen. But he was a Cancer. Thanks, Catherine. Catherine should know. She's a Kiwi, and Capricorn rising with the moon in Aries. There's his driving force there with Mars ruled moon in Aries. Yeah, very powerful. And he has Mercury Saturn in Leo, and Mercury in Leo generally is the great focus of concentration, being able to concentrate, and with its conjunction to Saturn in Leo, even more so. There's the persevering mental discipline that he has. Saturn, of course, being the ruler of Capricorn rising, his sole purpose. Yes, indeed. As I said, I think I've written a couple of articles about Hillary. You can find on my website. All right. So where am I now? Trying to find my page here. Oh, there we go. Right. Vivekananda's chart is still visible.
Sorry, Philip?
The chart is still visible. Vivekananda's chart is still visible.
Yes.
Okay. So the other thing about the Cancer Capricorn polarity that I pointed out before is that Capricorn represents the hard, dry desert or rock mountain, and Cancer, the opposite sign, represents the lush valley or river that flows around the foot of the mountain. That's one good metaphor to think about with Cancer Capricorn. Cancer is the feminine, the watery feminine, if you like, and Capricorn is the masculine, if you want to break it up into those very simplistic terms. Of course, Capricorn is ruled by Saturn, who's regarded as the father, and Cancer is ruled by the moon, who's regarded as the mother. So this is why Cancer Capricorn represents the family, the Cancer, and the collection of families, which is the state, Capricorn. And so many good astrologers have written some excellent essays about that you can find. So as Pluto transits through Capricorn for the last 10 years or so, I'm not quite sure exactly how long, it has in fact been breaking down many institutions, governments, and even families, for various different reasons. And so it's been creating quite a large transformation. And this year, Pluto moves into Aquarius briefly, and then back into Aquarius proper. I think it's in 2024, and will stay there for about 21 years in Aquarius, which will be an amazing period, which I'm going to write about soon. But anyway, still on the Capricorn theme. Yes, thanks for the information there on Hillary's chart. But that is correct, because I did do some research on that myself. Any other questions or comments? I don't have any other material today. I was hoping for a longer conversation, but so gone over a bit of material here. Vivekananda, Yogananda. Whoops, sorry, I've just gone off full page. Let's reselect that. The other thing I was going to say about the Star of Bethlehem mystery is that one famous artist, I think it was Giotto or someone like that, depicted a comet going across the sky behind the manger where the Christ child was inside. And some astronomers feel that because the light was so bright, that it was actually a comet and not a conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn. Others speculate that it was a conjunction of Venus and Jupiter, which are the two brightest stars in the sky, or maybe even Sirius. There are many, many essays and articles and books about that, about astrologers and astronomers speculating about what was the star that the Magi followed. So the jury is still out on that. So the other thing I want to say about initiation was that it's something that you initiate yourself, that you work on over a period of lifetimes at your own self-initiated effort and become something greater than what you were. This is the whole point of the evolution of consciousness. As the Christ said himself, greater things that ye shall do unto the measure of the stature of the Christ and beyond. That is the evolutionary rule. We will achieve higher than those who have achieved before us. The second degree initiation 5,000 years ago would be much harder to take these days because of that evolution of consciousness. And likewise for the other initiations, the bar is raised continually throughout the initiation process. So we've had many thousands, I don't know how many exactly, that have liberated themselves in the last 20 odd million years since individualization. It's a huge, almost incomprehensible period of time to contemplate. But there have been many liberated human beings, and there'll be even more in this next 2,000-year period. And of course, as I say in the newsletter, the last 3 years have brought about this, have opened a door to initiation again, just as it was opened last century in the world wars, particularly the Second World War, where thousands entered through the gates of initiation, taking the first degree, second degree, third degree, depending on what stage of evolution they were at. And the same thing, because of planetary events in the last 3 years, is taking place now. There are many people, you hear this phrase, you see it everywhere, that people are waking up. And this is indicative of the Christ consciousness descending. You see all sorts of people, financial analysts and people you wouldn't think, talking about Christ consciousness. It's quite amazing what's going on. And that is what is first contacted at the first initiation and realized, and creates a reversal of the wheel, the hopping off of the mutable cross onto the fixed cross. Hugh says, pondering Mars being ruler of Aries and Scorpio, is there a connection with the initiation process? Oh, absolutely. Mars is both the exoteric and esoteric ruler of Scorpio. So it's Mars that throws you into the battle against the not self. That is like Hercules wrestling the 9-headed Hydra in the swamp of Lernaea. That ultimately makes him triumph over the 9 heads, which are aspects of his own nature. I think that the Tibetan says he was the 3rd degree initiate way back in history when he undertook those tests. I think I mentioned the Scorpio newsletter last year about this, and the fact that the disciple in the last 12 lives of incarnation over period, over all the lives, he is taken through each sign of the zodiac and tested. So it's pretty, I was going to say brutal, or it's a very high bar that we have to jump over to get to initiation. And it's a great mystery why we are. Of course, we're one of the few planets that have used the system of initiation. We're told that Venus has, and that's why Venus finished its evolution and became a sacred planet much faster than was anticipated. that because the Earth fell behind in its planetary evolution because of the failure of the moon chain, dramatic music, the moon chain failure, we're playing catch up, essentially. We should be at the same level as Venus. We're still a so-called non-sacred planet. And initiation is a science that's been brought in to force us to forced evolution in many ways for us to catch up. Mars also the hierarchical ruler of Sagittarius, who says, the so-called basket of lives. It's a very esoteric factor that relates to the creative hierarchies. But essentially, with Sagittarius, a fire sign of spiritual philosophy, it's one of the most emotionally impulsive signs of the zodiac, and that's because of the Mars hierarchical rulership. Mars rules the solar plexus, and the idealism created by Mars on the sixth ray, which Mars rules, creates a emotional identification with ideas to the point that it creates a fundamentalism. And that's where all fundamental religions or fundamentalism in any area of human thought, whether it be science or religion, comes from, is that emotional or astral attachment to ideas. It's not completely clear thinking. It's before the third initiation for sure, or before the second initiation even. So, but there's also another very esoteric component to that Mars relating to the Diva evolution, but I won't go into that tonight. So Bethlehem, the house of bread. The other thing I want to mention was the acute intelligence of dolphins. As we all know, they're a great mystery. Some people have even wondered whether dolphins are actually more intelligent than humans or more evolved in consciousness than humans and work with this very scientific, very esoteric language. And so I keep an open mind on that. One of the first New Age workshops I ever went to back in, when was that? In 1987, I think, was in Sydney, a 3-day workshop about dolphins and their spiritual connection with Sirius and so forth. Anyway, another comment in the chat here. Okay. Some say that dolphins are from the angelic line, says Inez, and that's quite possible. Yet they are just so intelligent and so harmless to humanity. And of course, they are mammals as well. So the great mystery of Makara and the dolphin, it goes way back to Lemurian times. I don't know whether the dolphin is that old, but this factor of these angelic beings, the Elohim that I mentioned before, that's Elohim. They have that certain quality about them, and put it that way. Of course, a great playfulness too. We have much to learn from dolphins, and many people have dedicated their lives to studying them. So, the mystery of Makara is the dolphin, absolutely, not the crocodile as such, but the dolphin. All right. So, any other comments? With a few minutes left, if you want to discuss anything else. All right, I think we'll leave it there. We'll wrap it up. So thanks very much for coming, everyone. We will offer another webinar next month for the Aquarius Full Moon Festival. Just to remind some of you that we are working on the conference in Easter in the first few days of April this year, and we're getting various presenters lined up for that. It will be a Zoom-only conference, so do keep tuned for that. We'll let you know via our emails and in my newsletter about that in the next few months. So thanks very much for coming, and have a great full moon, and we'll see you next month. I'll hand it over to you now, Inez. Thank you.
Yes, thanks. Thank you all for coming. I'm going to leave you with a bit of music for a couple of minutes. Thanks.